Captain had not slept in 36 hours. She stood on the bridge of her reconnaissance ship, the Quiet Eye, and stared at the empty space where Velar Prime should have been sending signals. There was nothing, only silence, the kind of silence that made her stomach turn cold. They had been humanity's first friends among the stars. 80 years ago, when Earth's first deep space vessel had stumbled into their territory, they had not attacked. They had not run. They had simply opened a communication channel and said hello. Their bodies glowed with soft blue light, and their voices sounded like wind through crystal chimes. They were peaceful. They were kind. They had welcomed humanity into the galactic community like a family welcoming a lost child home. Now there had gone dark. Ordered her crew to push the engines harder. The Quiet Eye was a small ship, built for watching and listening, not for fighting, but she did not care about the risks. They had helped humanity through its first stumbling steps among the stars. They had shared technology, medicine, art. They had asked for nothing in return except friendship, would not abandon them now. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velar system. Its first officer, a young man named David Park, ran the initial scans. His face went white. His hands began to shake. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Walked to his station and looked at the data herself. For a long moment, she forgot how to breathe. Velar Prime was dead. The planet's oceans had boiled away. The great crystal cities that had once sparkled across its surface were now nothing but melted glass. The forests were ash. The mountains had been flattened. Orbital stations drifted in pieces, their crews frozen in the vacuum of space. The beautiful blue-green world that had visited 3 times during her career was now a ball of scorched rock and poisoned air. 4 billion had lived on that planet. Mothers, fathers, children, artists and scientists and teachers and farmers, all of them were gone, every single one. His crew stood in silence. Some of them cried. Others simply stared at their screens, unable to process what they were seeing, wanted to scream. She wanted to break something, but she was the captain. She had to hold herself together at least until they finished their mission. She ordered the ship to move closer. They needed to gather evidence. They needed to understand what had happened. They needed to find out who had done this. The Quiet Eye swept through the debris field that had once been Velar Prime's orbital infrastructure. Sensors picked up strange energy readings, signatures that did not match any weapon in the Galactic Concord's database. This was new technology, powerful technology, technology designed for one purpose only: total destruction. Then Park called out from his station. His voice was barely a whisper. "Captain, you need to see this." Move to the main. Park adjusted the image, focusing on the planet's largest continent. Someone had burned something into the surface. Letters. Massive letters, each 100s of kilometers tall, carved into the dead earth with weapons of unimaginable power. One word. Next. Felt her blood turn to ice. This was not just an attack. This was a message, a threat. Whoever had done this was not finished. They were coming for someone else, and based on the location, based on the fact that they were humanity's closest allies, knew exactly who that someone was. Earth. She recorded everything, every scan, every image, every piece of data her ship could gather. Then she ordered an immediate return to Earth. The Quiet Eye turned away from the graveyard that had once been Velar Prime and jumped back into faster-than-light travel. The journey home took 4 days. Did not sleep during any of them. She reviewed the data again and again, looking for clues about who could have done this. The energy signatures suggested weapons technology far beyond anything the Concord possessed. The attack had been fast, brutal, and complete. Whoever these attackers were, they did not believe in mercy. When the Quiet Eye finally reached Earth, was escorted directly to the United Earth Defense Council's headquarters in Geneva. She walked into a room filled with admirals and generals and politicians, all of them waiting to hear what she had found. She told them everything. She showed them the images of the destroyed cities, the boiled oceans, the ash-covered continents. She showed them the word burned into the planet's surface. She gave them the casualty estimate, 4 billion dead. An entire species nearly wiped out. Only the who had been traveling off-world had survived. Maybe a few million, scattered across the galaxy, now homeless and alone. The room was silent when she finished. Some of the officers looked sick, others looked angry, a few looked afraid. At the head of the table sat Admiral Stone, the commander of Earth's defense forces. He was an old man with hair and calm eyes. He had led humanity's military for 20 years, through border disputes and pirate attacks and diplomatic crises. But he had never faced anything like this. Stone studied the data for a long time. His face showed no emotion. His hands did not shake. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and cold. "Do we know who did this?" Shook her head. "The energy signatures don't match any known species, but the attack came from the galactic rim. There are regions out there we've never explored, species we've never contacted." Stone nodded slowly. He looked around the table at his officers, at the politicians, at the scared faces and angry faces and confused faces. "They were our friends," he said. "They trusted us, they believed in peace, and someone murdered them to send us a message." He paused. "I think it's time we send a message of our own." He stood up and walked to a communication panel on the wall. He entered a code that only 3 people on Earth knew, a code that had not been used in over a century. "What are you doing?" asked one of the politicians. Stone's answer was simple, 2 words that changed everything. "Open the vaults." Somewhere on Mars, deep beneath the Red Mountains, ancient machines began to wake. Lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark for 200 years. Computers that had been sleeping since before anyone in that room was born started running calculations for war. Humanity's true weapons were about to be unleashed, and the galaxy would learn a terrible truth. When humans said someone was their friend, they meant it. And when someone hurt their friends, there would be a price to pay. A price measured in fire and blood, and the silence of dead worlds. Commander opened her eyes and felt cold, deep cold, the kind of cold that went all the way to the bone. She tried to move, but her body did not respond. Her muscles had been asleep for a very long time. A voice spoke to her through the fog in her mind. "Commander, you are being revived. Please remain calm. Current year, 2347. 2347. Did the math slowly. She had gone into in 2158. That was 189 years ago. Almost 2 centuries of frozen darkness, waiting for a war that might never come. Now that war had arrived. Medical robots worked around her, warming her body, injecting fluids, helping her muscles remember how to move. The process took several hours. When she could finally stand, a young officer was waiting for her with a uniform and a data pad. "Commander," the officer said, "Admiral Stone requests your presence in the command center immediately. I'm sorry we don't have time for a proper adjustment period." Took the uniform. Her hands were steady. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. She had known, when she volunteered for the Vault program, that she might wake up to a galaxy on fire. That was the whole point. She dressed quickly and followed the officer through metal corridors carved deep into the rock of Olympus Mons, the largest mountain on Mars. Around her, she could hear other opening. Thousands of soldiers were waking up, men and women who had made the same choice she had, to sleep through their lives so that humanity might survive its darkest hour. The command center was a massive room filled with screens and holographic displays. Officers ran from station to station, coordinating the awakening of the fleet. And what a fleet it was! Had seen the Prometheus-class dreadnoughts during her training, but seeing them now, on the screens, rising from their underground hangars, still took her breath away. Each ship was 3 kilometers long. Their hulls were made from compressed neutron star material, nearly indestructible. Their weapons could crack planets. Their engines could bend space itself. They were the most powerful warships ever built by any species in the known galaxy. And Earth had kept them secret for 200 years. Admiral Stone stood at the center of the room, watching the screens with calm eyes. When he saw approach, he nodded. "Commander, thank you for waking up." "What's the situation, sir?" Stone pointed to one of the screens. It showed images that made stomach turn. A dead world, burned cities, a word carved into the ground. "They are gone," Stone said. 4 billion of them, killed by an empire called the Dominion. They came from the far edge of the galaxy. They've been expanding for thousands of years, killing any species they see as a threat. They were close to us. They wanted to send a message before they came for Earth. Stared at the images. She had never met but she knew their history. They had welcomed humanity into the stars. They had been friends. "How many ships do we have?" she asked. 200 Prometheus-class dreadnoughts, 50,000 crew members, all from the Vault program, all volunteers. Understood what that meant. 50,000 people who had chosen to give up their lives, their families, their futures, all to be ready for this moment. Many of them had entered over a century ago. Their parents, their children, their friends were all dead now, gone to old age while they slept in the dark. "They don't know about us," Stone continued. "They've been watching the Galactic conquered for decades. They saw that humanity kept only a small defense fleet. They thought we were weak. They thought we were easy prey. They were wrong. Yes, they were very wrong." Stone turned to face her directly. "I'm giving you command of the 7th Battle Group, 20 ships. You'll be leading the first wave when we make contact with the—" Felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto her shoulders. 20 ships, thousands of lives, a battle against an enemy that had wiped out 4 billion people without mercy. She accepted without hesitation. Over the next 3 days, the Prometheus fleet prepared for war. Ships were checked and loaded with weapons. Crews were briefed on the enemy's known capabilities. Pilots ran simulations of possible battle scenarios. The whole operation moved with smooth, deadly efficiency. But there was also grief. Spent one evening reading about what had happened in the galaxy while she slept. She learned that her sister had married, had children, and had died peacefully at the age of 92. She learned that her parents had passed away within a year of each other, still proud of the daughter who had volunteered to protect humanity's future. She learned that the cherry tree she had planted in her family's garden had grown tall and beautiful. She would never see any of it. That was the price of the Vault program. The soldiers who volunteered gave up everything. They would never go home. Their homes no longer existed. They existed only to fight, to protect, to ensure that humanity would survive whatever threats the galaxy might throw at them. On the 4th day, the Conquered received a transmission from the Dominion. It was a demand for surrender. The commander spoke with cold arrogance, listing the terms. Humanity would disarm its fleet, surrender its colonies, and submit to Dominion rule. Resistance would result in the complete destruction of Earth. Admiral Stone recorded humanity's response personally. "You killed our friends," he said, his voice steady and hard. "You murdered 4 billion innocent people to send us a message. Now hear ours. There will be no surrender. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. You wanted to teach us fear. Instead, you have reminded us what we are. We are humans. We have spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. We have killed each other in numbers that would make your empire look like children playing games. And now, for the first time in our history, we have a worthy enemy. Come for us if you dare. We will be waiting." The transmission ended. They did not respond. The vault doors opened. 200 dreadnoughts rose from beneath the red mountains of Mars, their engines burning like newborn stars. They formed into battle groups and turned toward the edge of human space, where they were gathering their forces. Stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Prometheus 7, and watched the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, an enemy was waiting. an enemy that had killed billions, an enemy that thought humanity was weak. They were about to learn the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was patient. Humanity had been preparing for this war since before the first human walked on the moon, and now that the war had come, humanity would fight with everything it had. For Earth, for every friend humanity had ever made among the stars. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. The darkness of space swallowed them, and somewhere in the distance, the Dominion began to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The Galactic Concord was in chaos. For 80 years, they had believed humanity was a peaceful species with modest military power. Now they watched 200 warships rise from Mars, each one more powerful than anything in their combined fleets. The other species demanded explanations. They demanded answers. They wanted to know why humanity had lied. Admiral Stone stood before the Concord Council on a holographic transmission from his flagship. Representatives of 12 species stared at him, their expressions ranging from fear to anger to confusion. "You deceived us," said the ambassador, his scales flushing red with anger. "You pretended to be weak while hiding weapons of mass destruction." Stone did not apologize. "We hoped we would never need those ships. We built them because hope is not a strategy." "But why?" asked the representative, her voice soft and sad. "We trusted you." Stone took a deep breath. "Because we know what we are. Humans are not naturally peaceful. We fought wars among ourselves for 10,000 years. We killed hundreds of millions of our own kind before we finally learned to work together. We carry that violence in our blood, in our bones, in our history. When we joined the Concord, we chose peace. But we never forgot how to fight. We never let ourselves become helpless, because we knew someday something would come that did not care about peace." He pointed to an image of Velar Prime, the burned world, the word carved into its surface. The believed in peace. They had no hidden fleet. They had no secret weapons. And now 4 billion of them are dead. We will not make the same mistake. We will not trust our survival to the goodwill of strangers. The council fell silent. They understood, even if they did not like it. The galaxy was a dangerous place. Peace was fragile, and humanity had simply been better prepared than anyone realized. 3 days later, the Dominion fleet arrived at the border of human space. 500 warships, arranged in perfect formation, led by a command vessel the size of a small moon. They had conquered dozens of species. They had never lost a war. They expected this battle to be easy. Commander led the first human response. 50 Prometheus-class dreadnoughts against 500 enemy ships. The odds looked terrible. They were not. The two fleets met at a point in space called Horizon's Edge, far from any inhabited world. The commander broadcast a final demand for surrender, did not bother to respond. She simply gave the order to attack. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The Prometheus ships did not fight like any other fleet they had faced. They did not form defensive lines. They did not hold position and exchange fire. Instead, they scattered, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually calculated by combat computers processing millions of variables per second. They fired their weapons. Most missed. The human ships were never where they expected them to be. Then the humans fired back. The first volley ripped through the formation like a blade through paper. Human weapons did not just damage enemy ships. They destroyed them completely. Antimatter warheads, graviton lances, plasma streams hot enough to melt through any known armor. Each Prometheus ship was a flying arsenal of destruction, carrying weapons that they had never imagined. But the most devastating weapon was not physical, it was tactical. Humanity had spent learning to fight. They had developed strategies for every possible situation. They had studied war the way other species studied art or science, and now all of that knowledge was being applied against a single enemy. watched from her bridge as her ships executed maneuver after maneuver with perfect precision. They flanked the formation. They cut off escape routes. They targeted command ships and communication relays, blinding the enemy fleet before destroying it piece by piece. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 487 warships had been destroyed. Humanity had lost 3 ships against almost 500. The commander had escaped on his massive command vessel, running back to Dominion space at maximum speed. Let him go. She wanted him to deliver a message. As the human fleet regrouped among the wreckage, opened a communication channel to the single cruiser she had ordered her ships to spare. "Tell your masters what happened here," she said. "Tell them we destroyed their fleet in 6 hours. Tell them we have 200 more ships just like these. Tell them we are coming. And tell them this is what happens when you hurt our friends." She closed the channel. The cruiser turned and fled. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The other conquered species watched the recordings with a mixture of awe and terror. Humanity had hidden its true strength for generations. Now that strength was revealed, and it was more terrible than anyone had imagined. But something else spread along with the fear, something unexpected: hope. Species that had lived under the shadow of the Dominion for centuries began to whisper among themselves. They could be beaten. The humans had proven it. Maybe the long nightmare was finally ending. Admiral Stone received hundreds of messages from across the galaxy. Some were angry, some were afraid, but many were simple requests for help. Species conquered by the worlds enslaved. People who had given up hope years ago now asking if humanity would fight for them too. Stone read every message. He did not promise anything he could not deliver, but he also did not turn anyone away. Humanity had joined the conquered to make friends. Now it would fight to protect them. At a memorial service for the 3 ships lost at Horizon's edge, stood before the assembled crews and spoke. "Before every battle," she said, "I want each of you to remember one name, just one. Pick any you can find in the records. Learn about them. Learn about their family, their work, their dreams. And when you go into combat, fight for that person. Fight for someone who cannot fight for themselves. That is why we exist. That is why we trained. That is why we slept for 200 years, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to protect." She paused. Her voice was steady. "The will come again. They will bring more ships. They will fight harder. And we will be ready, because we are human, and humans do not abandon their friends." The crew saluted. The memorial ended, and the fleet began preparing for the next phase of the war. They were not going to wait for the to attack again. They were going to take the fight to enemy territory. They were going to show the Dominion what happened when you awaken the sleeping giant of Earth. The long march toward space had begun. The human fleet pushed deep into territory. System by system, battle by battle, they broke the power of the Dominion that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. But Commander learned quickly that war was not a glorious thing. It was blood and fire and the screams of dying soldiers. It was watching friends die and having to keep fighting anyway. The first major campaign targeted military stations along their border. These were massive fortresses, each one home to thousands of soldiers and hundreds of warships. The commanders expected to hold them for months or even years. They fell in weeks. Led the assault on Station, the largest fortress in the region. Her 20 ships faced 200 defenders and a station armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it was over, the station was captured. But 4 of ships had been destroyed, and 2,000 human soldiers were dead. She walked through the medical bay afterward, looking at the wounded, young men and women missing arms and legs, burned victims wrapped in bandages, soldiers staring at the ceiling with empty eyes, their minds broken by the horror they had experienced. This was the cost of war. This was what the politicians back on Earth did not see when they watched the victory reports on their screens. but there were also moments that reminded why they were fighting. On a planet called 3, the human fleet discovered a prison camp. They had conquered the people 50 years ago and had been using them as slave labor ever since. When human soldiers opened the camp gates, the inside could not believe what they were seeing. "You came for us," an old woman said, tears running down her alien face. After all these years, someone actually came. Held the woman's hand and made a promise. "We will free every world they have enslaved, every single one." The liberation campaign continued for months. Human ships swept through space, destroying military targets and freeing conquered populations. Species that had been enslaved for generations saw the Dominion's flags come down, and human relief ships arrive with food, medicine, and hope. But they did not give up easily. They regrouped and launched counterattacks. They used ambush tactics and suicide strikes. They fought with the desperation of an empire that knew it was losing everything. The Battle of the Nebula was the worst. A fleet of 600 ships caught a human supply convoy in the nebula's sensor-blocking clouds. By the time reinforcements arrived, half the convoy was destroyed. 8,000 human soldiers and crew died in a single day. Attended the memorial service. She read the names of every ship lost, every person killed. She did not cry. She had learned long ago to save her tears for private moments, but inside she felt each name like a knife in her heart. After the service, a young pilot approached her. He could not have been more than 20 years old, barely old enough to fight. "Commander," he said, "how do you keep going? After everything we've seen, all the people we've lost, how do you still fight?" Thought about the question for a long time. "Before every battle," she said, "I think about one. Her name was. She was a teacher on Velar Prime. She taught children how to paint. She had a small house near the ocean and a garden full of flowers that glowed in the dark. She never hurt anyone in her entire life." She paused. They killed her. They killed her students. They killed her family. They burned her garden and boiled her ocean and turned everything she loved into ash. And they did not care. They did not even remember her name. She looked at the young pilot. "I fight so that death means something. I fight so that what happened to her will never happen to anyone else. I fight because someone has to stand between the monsters and the innocent. That is why I keep going. That is why all of us keep going." The pilot nodded slowly. He understood. As the campaign continued, found herself thinking more and more about themselves. In the beginning, it had been easy to see them as monsters. They had killed 4 billion without mercy. They had enslaved dozens of species. They had built an empire on blood and cruelty. But as the human fleet pushed deeper into Dominion territory, she began to see a more complicated picture. Not all were warriors. Many were civilians who had simply been born into the wrong society. They had families, children, dreams that had nothing to do with conquest. Some of them had even tried to resist the Dominion's expansion and had been punished for it. On a colony world called 7, forces captured a city of 2 million civilians. Her officers asked what to do with them. Some suggested harsh measures. They had shown humanity no mercy. Why should humans show them any? Remembered Earth's own history, the wars, the genocides, the moments when humans had become the very monsters they claimed to fight against. She would not let that happen again. "We are not she told her officers. "We do not kill civilians. We do not torture prisoners. We do not become the thing we're fighting. That is what separates us from them. That is what makes us human." She established camps for civilians. She brought in food and medical supplies. She treated them with dignity, even when some of her own soldiers grumbled about it. Word of her actions spread through space. Not all of it was positive. Some commanders used it as propaganda, claiming that human mercy was really weakness in disguise. But others began to wonder. Their government had told them that humans were savage beasts who would destroy everything in their path. Instead, Humans were feeding their children and healing their sick. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the Dominion's unity. Admiral Stone approved of this approach. In a private message, he wrote, "They expected us to be like them. They expected us to burn their worlds and enslave their people. When we don't, it confuses them. It makes them question everything they've been taught. Our mercy is a weapon they don't know how to fight." Finally, after 18 months of continuous combat, the human fleet reached the... It was a massive planet, 3 times the size of Earth, covered in towering cities and military installations. Billions of civilians lived there. Millions of soldiers defended it. Its fleet took position in orbit. The military was shattered. Their stations were destroyed. Their fleets were gone. They had nothing left to fight with, but they expected the worst. They gathered in shelters and prayed to gods who had never answered them before. They waited for the fire to fall from the sky. They waited for humanity to do what they would have done in the same position. Admiral Stone broadcast a message to the planet below. His voice reached every city, every village, every shelter where terrified huddled in the darkness. "People of the," he said, "we have the power to destroy you. Your military cannot stop us. Your government cannot save you. You are completely at our mercy." He paused. "But we are not you." Watch from her bridge as the words sank in. On the planet below, civilians looked up at the sky, unable to believe what they were hearing. "We did not come to destroy your world," Stone continued. "We came to end the war. We came to stop the killing. We came to give you a choice that your government never gave: the surrender, accept peace, and live." The long march was over, but the hardest part was just beginning. The Dominion surrendered 3 days after Admiral Stone's message. Their leaders had no choice. Their military was destroyed. Their people were terrified, and humanity had offered them something they had never expected: the chance to live. But not everyone was happy with this decision. Across human space, protests erupted. People demanded revenge. They wanted them to suffer for what they had done to the 4 billion innocent lives burned away in a single day, and humanity was just going to let the killers survive. It felt wrong. It felt like justice was being. Commander understood their anger. She felt it herself in quiet moments when she remembered the images of Velar Prime, the dead cities, the boiled oceans, the word carved into the ground like a cruel joke. Part of her wanted to give the order. Part of her wanted to watch the burn. But she did not give that order. Neither did Admiral Stone. Neither did the Defense Council back on Earth. Instead, they began the long, difficult work of building peace. The Treaty of Velar's memory was signed on the anniversary of the destruction of Velar Prime. It took place on the burned surface of the planet itself, in the shadow of a memorial being built to honor the 4 billion who had died. Human and representatives sat across from each other at a simple table, while cameras broadcast the moment to every corner of the galaxy. The terms were harsh but fair. The Dominion would be dissolved. Their military would be permanently reduced. War criminals would face trial for their actions. All enslaved species would be freed immediately. They would pay reparations to every world they had harmed for the next 100 years. But there would be no genocide, no mass punishment, no burning of cities or killing of civilians. Humanity would not become the monster it had fought. After the treaty was signed, Admiral Stone gave a speech to the gathered representatives. "Many people have asked why we showed mercy," he said. "They say they deserve to be destroyed. They say we should have done to them what they did to the... And maybe they're right. Maybe the do deserve destruction." He paused and looked at the ruins around him. The memorial was still being built. Someday it would be a beautiful garden, filled with plants from every world they had touched. But for now, it was just bare rock and construction equipment. "But here is what I believe," Stone continued. "Revenge is easy. Mercy is hard. When we chose not to destroy we didn't do it for them. We did it for ourselves. We did it to prove that we are better than our worst impulses. We did it to show the galaxy that humanity can be trusted with power." He turned to face the cameras. "For 10,000 years, humans fought each other. We committed terrible crimes against our own species. We nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. But we learned. We grew. We became something better. And when we finally reached the stars, we promised ourselves that we would not spread that old violence to new worlds." His voice hardened. "But let me be clear, we are not weak. The ships that broke the Dominion are still ready. The soldiers who won this war are still watching. If anyone else decides to test humanity, if anyone else thinks they can murder our friends and escape justice, they will learn the same lesson they learned. We will come for them, we will find them, and we will make them answer for what they've done." He took a breath. Peace is not the absence of strength. Peace is the choice to use that strength wisely. Today we choose peace. Tomorrow we will defend it. The speech ended. The galaxy watched in silence. In the months that followed, a new order began to take shape. The species freed from slavery rebuilt their worlds. The galactic conquered expanded, welcoming new members who wanted protection from future threats. And humanity found itself at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Commander retired from active duty after the war. She had spent nearly 200 years in service to humanity, counting the time in. She had fought in more battles than she could remember. She had lost friends, watched ships burn, and carried the weight of command through humanity's darkest hour. Now she wanted to rest. She chose to live on Velar Prime, in a small house near the memorial. The planet was slowly being terraformed, returned to life by a massive project funded by the treaty reparations. Refugees who had survived off-world were beginning to return, building new communities among the ruins of the old. One morning, walked to the memorial and stood before the wall of names. 4 billion names, carved into black stone, stretching for kilometers in every direction. She found one name near the beginning, Teacher Beloved. The woman she had thought about before every battle. "I hope we did you proud," said quietly. "I hope you would understand why we didn't destroy them. I hope you can forgive us for choosing mercy." She stood there for a long time, alone with her thoughts. Then a small voice interrupted her silence. "Excuse me." Turned, a young child stood behind her, glowing faintly blue in the morning light. The child held a small flower in her hands. "My mother said you were one of the humans who saved us," the child said. "Is that true?" Knelt down to the child's level. "I was one of many. We all worked together." "Why?" the child asked. "Why did you help us? My mother said your friends were hurt too." Thought about the question. It was the same question people had been asking since the war ended. Why did humans fight? Why did they risk everything for species they had only known for a few decades? "Because that's what friends do," she said finally. "When someone you love is hurt, you help them. When someone attacks your family, you protect them. You don't ask what you'll get in return. You just do it because it's right." The child considered this. Then she held out the flower. "This is for the wall," she said. "For all the people who died. My grandmother was one of them." Took the flower gently. Together, they walked to the memorial wall and placed it at the base, among thousands of other flowers and gifts left by mourners from across the galaxy. "Thank you," the child said, "for remembering them." Then she ran off to join her mother, her small form glowing against the green grass of the reborn world. Watched her go. This was why they had fought. This was why they had chosen mercy, not for glory or conquest, but for moments like this, for children who would grow up in peace, for gardens that would bloom on scorched earth, for a future where friendship meant something. Far away on Mars, the Prometheus fleet returned to the vaults. The great ships descended into their underground hangars. The crews entered once more, their duty complete. The lights went dark. The machines fell silent. They would sleep again, maybe for decades, maybe for centuries. waiting in the darkness for a threat that might never come. But if it did come, they would wake, they would rise, and they would remind the galaxy once more why humanity was not to be underestimated. Above the vault doors, someone had carved a new inscription. It read, "We sleep so others may live, we wake so others may not die." The war was over, peace had been won, and somewhere in the galaxy, a young child was learning to paint flowers, just like her grandmother had done, on a world that should have been dead but was instead, against all odds, coming back to life. That was humanity's true victory, not the battles won or the enemies destroyed, but the simple fact that, when given the power to end everything, they had chosen to begin again.